Or maybe it's not amazing. That means that we're halfway through the teaching semester. So today I've actually changed the order in the what's on the, so far we're going actually in exactly the order that's on the course outline. So we're not really in the order today, but it doesn't matter why. I'm working on talking about research ethics today. I just want to remind you though that in addition to talking about this, maybe we'll wait till the end. I just want to remind you that you should be all working on your literature review. And if anybody has any questions about how to do that, maybe we should talk about that again, as people don't come to every lecture and the rest of it. But let's just press on to research ethics. But before I start, is there anybody with any question about any theoretical aspect of the class so far? I'm going to assume that while we're waiting that there's nobody. So today we're going to be talking about research ethics, why it matters. Really not going to be focusing on the research ethics process. Mr. Garvey, what's your question?
Is it possible for you to, at the end of the class, to just list the structure of the literature review, please?
Sure, I can definitely do that. All right, so just as a point, the basic structure is introduction, body, and summary. And by the way, you never type the word body ever in a paper. The problem is not so much that that's the structure. The problem is how to structure within that. Like what's in the summary, what's in the body, what's in the introduction, and why is the body like usually 80% of the size. So it takes a little while to like talk about that, but we'll go back to the end once somebody reminds me. Okay, please, whatever you do, don't type the word body anywhere. You can type summary and introduction. I would usually suggest that you don't type introduction. Why? Because the first chapter is an introductory chapter. So the first assignment, which you call a concept paper, that becomes the introductory chapter of your proposal. And so it's usually, normally in the literature review, you don't type the word introduction again, even though there's an introduction to the literature review. Anyway, so let's talk about why research ethics matter. It matters because there's a potential of research causing harm to participants or researchers. And those participants can be human beings or animals, or the researchers who are involved in the research project. And the backstory, which you're going to see in a second, to why anybody ever thought about it from an academic point of view was because of what the Jews essentially did to, not the Jews, what Hitler and his cronies basically did to the Jews and Blacks and other people. So because of that history, which involved what was considered research on human beings, was actually, if you actually read it, you actually know it was more than killing people. They actually did some research on the people without their consent and then killed them. So that was actually also part of what Hitler did. Because of that, there's been, and many other things since that, there's been this whole area of research ethics. And so we can look at how we can protect participants from harm, how we can ensure that people have privacy in research. Is the ethics robust enough so that when you ask people to be in a research project, will it be something that's not just a waste of their time? Because if you're not able to generalize from a research project, then it's a waste of time and people shouldn't be in it. At least that's one argument. Is there any situation that we can deceive people in research and it be okay? That's a big question which we can discuss. How should children and other people who are vulnerable, like older people with dementia, how should they be treated? What do we do with statistics that are misleading? And what about things like plagiarism and other kinds of, this is not called self-plagiarism. What about all the ethical issues in academic writing? So there's a lot of research ethics, of which this is a subset. And we won't talk about this now because it's on the slideshow, but it's really, when you get to major project, all the projects that you do will have to go through a application process. So just as a context, UTech actually has a University Research Ethics Committee. It actually has two tiers. So for tier one is the University Research Ethics Committee, and the other tier is a faculty Research Ethics Committee. And UTech says that it is basically wanting high standards of research integrity. And so they say that in general, they want people to follow ethical principles as set out in the Declaration of Helsinki, which we're going to talk about in a second, as well as UTech ethical guidelines. So let's go to some backstory. So here's the backstory one in computing that I find to be the most shocking. Maybe there are many others, because you could even say that maybe something like the US national, no, but that's not research. I mean, you can't, there's so many things that is unethical online, but most of them are not research. So I think of all the research ones that I've read, this might be the most shocking that I have read that is old. So this is what, 10 years ago, two people who, I'm not sure if they worked for Facebook or not, but two people published a paper based on, so in 2014, they published a paper. So in 2012, yeah, I was a member of Facebook then. Wasn't doing much on it, but I was a member. So, so it basically what they did was they took thousands of people and took half of them and showed them the positive stories from their Facebook friends, and took the other half and showed them the negative stories first. And then it was published in a journal. And then because it was published, people shared on Facebook that this thing was published. And people were like, so wait, when did we find out that they were experimenting on us? So there was a lot of furor on it. So suppose you were in this 2012 study, please don't tell me you weren't old enough. Just suppose. Let's say it right now today. Let's say you're on Facebook, but instead it could have been on Instagram instead, or any other social media platform. Just right now we're doing a hypothetical experiment. So let's say this was on a social media platform that you're actually on. Is there any reason why you would object? And if you wouldn't object, were the rights of the study participants in 2012 violated? What do you think? Sorry, I'm asking for feedback, guys. Participation. $17 people plus me. You're not sure? Okay. Can anybody imagine why some people were objecting to it after the fact?
Oh, maybe because of privacy issues.
Privacy issues? No. I mean, I have not read anybody who said anything about privacy issues. I mean, there's a possibility. The only way there could have been a privacy issue, which is not said here, is that they now took the information about how they were responding based on the, okay, remember, what they did was they showed people different feeds and saw how they responded to negative and positive stories. If they now disclose, hold on, if they disclose that to other people or to other companies, that would have been a privacy violation. There was nothing here about that. So there's no information that there was any privacy violations. So no, not a privacy problem.
Well, hi, good afternoon, miss.
Good afternoon.
Well, miss, wouldn't it still need that consent from the individual to say, hey, we're doing this study and we would like your consent to share this information, yes or
Right.
no?
So yes, so my name, I prefer Teets, Ms. Muir.
Sorry, Miss Muir, apologies.
I actually want Ms. going that far. Yes, so you just talked about something called informed consent. So guess what? Facebook actually had informed consent hidden in this very long consent form. So when you sign up for Facebook, in it is that you agree, you agree to things, almost every single thing like this, that it will be always changing. So if you don't know, you can look it up. Almost every social media will say that the conditions, no, you can't say nobody, which very few people read. Also, by the way, guys, your academics, or you shouldn't say your academics, you're at a university. When you generalize and you're at a university, you should show that you know that not everybody's the same. So you can basically say that very few people. That's one thing about young people, you always assume that everybody's like you. So even I, who used to read, most things I hardly read anymore. If I do read, I just read the first paragraph, because once it's beyond that, unless it's very short, it tends to be so overwhelming to try to read all of it. And I remember when I signed up for Facebook, for some reason, I didn't realize the big step I was taking. So not only did if I did read, I did not read much. I literally shared more data with them than I would have shared what I know. So anytime I share from another social media platform, I give them very little information, because they're going to get all the information anyway. So like when I gave them all the colleges I went to, nothing I gave them is like the end of the world. But at least yeah, it's just like, wow. So yes, so one real thing is, some people might say they gave consent, but it wasn't informed consent. Because when you press click, I agree, did you really understand that it included experiment? So that's one reason. So that's one. Any other, and there was one other basic complaint that people had. So yeah, so that was a good answer. So let me give you a hint. What about the emotional state part of it? Think about it, guys. Yes?
They were probably, it could cause a mental issue in their.
Yes. Think about COVID. COVID as a cause. Should we say cause? Based on the evidence, the fact of this 2 years of a pandemic has literally had a mental health impact on the whole globe at every age. So, I mean, it's unlikely to be at the same level, but if Facebook was showing negative posts before positive jokes to some people, the people who are in a very poor mental health status, it is likely that it could be problematic for them. So, so this is the actual facts now. They use it for 689,000 randomly selected users. And Facebook said that users consent to this manipulation in the terms of agreement. In fact, I was so intrigued, I actually went to look, and it was there, experiment. So I don't know if it was there when I started, but I remember sure I looked. It says they can change the terms of agreement at any time. And when I looked, when I first learned about this, I'm like, yeah, there's the thing about experiment. So of all the ones that I found, this is one that I found hilarious. So this particular quotation, so somebody, Mr. Wittstein, said, I wonder if Facebook killed anyone with their emotional manipulation stunt. They're scaling with the press people out there as possible. Now, I actually think this is overkill, but certainly it's plausible to at least say, because somebody was depressed and all you're showing them is negative posts. It just might be what is needed to put them over the top. We don't know, we don't know. But the point is, it certainly could maybe make some people need more mental health counseling if this was going on for a whole week. Before they were seeing these positive posts, and now they're seeing negative posts. And if they don't stay there long enough, and by the way, this is aside from this now, there's no literature that shows that people who are on social media tends to be have more mental problems than those who are not. Especially the longer you are on it. This is separate from this thing. There's no research that shows that separate from this. So it's not a minor thing, So for real. So, and then it's not only that, because it's not on the screen here, is that this particular Facebook research study was actually literally not, there was no ethics approval until afterwards, because as people were essentially talking about it, somebody noticed that there was no approval, and so basically what they did was they went and got approval after the fact, and then the publisher say, here's our approval, which is not the reason. So would anybody argue as to why people say that you should have this? Remember, back to UTech actually has an ethics committee. Why would people say? Well, first, it is certainly possible that if there was going to be, let's forget about killed, if this particular experiment could cause psychological harm to people, even though they don't kill them, just, so that they feel poor quality of life and need more expensive treatment, that is something that is the experiment is having negative harm. And so you should either not do the research or do it with consent or find ways to give people who are negatively harmed a way to get compensated. Sometime soon I should be doing a research project as a participant, because a family member has dementia, and somebody who's doing a PhD study has asked me to be in that study. And basically I was surprised that as part of the study, they basically said that if I need to, I can get counseling if the research questions has a psychological impact on me. The point is they're prepared for that, whereas this one, there was no preparation that in case there was a negative impact. So let's go to the one that I was mentioning earlier, which is much more unbelievable. So in 1900, Tuscany provided a whole heap of money for a bunch of things: schools, factories, business, agriculture. What happened was they decided to, with that money, do a study of 399 men with syphilis and 201 without, so 600 people. And that is, in case you don't know, it's a sexually transmitted disease that before there was treatment, it would lead to death automatically. Everybody who was in this study were Black African-American men, and they published a paper, as in the people who were doing the study, in 1936, and they decided to follow the people until death. However, in 1945, penicillin, which I hope you've all heard of, there was proof that it could treat syphilis. But guess what? They did not tell these people, they did not take them out of the study, nothing. So it continues. And in 1972, so hold on, 1945, penicillin accepted. 1972, there's a first newspaper article. 1968, concerns raised about the ethics of the study. So from 1945, or before, but certainly here, there should have been something changed. Nothing changed. It's not until 1974, 10 billion out of court settlement. Clinton, the president, apologizes like a whole decades later on behalf of the nation. And the last participant in the study dies, and the widow receiving these benefits, talking about out of court settlement, dies in 2009. And this is not the only study, but this and many other studies and other, like this, I remember the name of the lady. This and a couple other studies is exactly why African Americans in the US is very hesitant about research. And even like the uptake on the vaccine right now, so that it's not for you to tell me what you believe about vaccines. Because of studies like this is exactly why people are like, wait, what are they up to now? Because this is not a joke. This is a real thing. And people knew that this is now a cure, and then they did nothing. Isn't this unbelievable? So I don't think anybody needs me to ask what's the ethical problem. But while we're at it, what's the ethical problem here, guys?
They didn't inform the previous
Yes, but
volunteers.
Let me, yeah, it's true, but let's look at these three. If these are the three, remember earlier we said that UTEC said that they were wanting to look at UTEC ethical principles and what's in the Declaration of Helsinki. It's three key ethical principles: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Which of those three would you say was the worst violated? I mean, you could actually, well, respect. Okay, explain how the respect for persons. I wouldn't say that's the worst one, but yeah, respect for persons was a real thing. How was respect for persons violated in that study?
Due to the fact that they didn't inform the volunteers that there was a cure for it.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yes, that's true. So that is respect for persons. So part of respect for persons include informed consent, which what was mentioned earlier. But in addition to that, there were other problems. Oh, beneficence means that as a research study or anything, it's a big word that just means it has benefit. So in this case, if a research study will benefit society, it has beneficence. And so the idea of all research studies is that people do research studies in order to benefit society. Sometimes they actually don't, but the goal is in every research study, there should be respect for persons, there should be an intent to benefit society, and there should be justice. So I'm back
See?
to, yes?
Justice how?
Well, I think you all know the word justice. So I'm going to get back to there, but I'm back to we're back to the example. So the example, everybody in Jamaica know that we as Jamaicans love to cry for justice. So I don't need to define justice. I will get back to in the context of research that is done in two ways typically, but I'm back to. So we took some people who you might be related to. But it could have been Jamaicans go up there and there are Black Jamaicans up there. It could actually have affected your own family. I'm back to the story. There are some people, they had syphilis. Is the only issue respect for person? So by the way, the study would have had beneficent initially. Why? Because they didn't know all, I said the world as a whole did not know everything that there was to know about syphilis, a very problematic sexually transmitted disease. So by doing this study, it actually had beneficent. So I can tell you already, it's not beneficent. Because initially the study had beneficent and there was a major paper published. And as soon as we found out that syphilis was a cure, there was clearly a justice issue. So I don't know, can anybody tell me what is a justice issue? Because apparently I have to be hinting and nobody can tell me. So for example, let's go to this. Clearly some court thought it was a justice issue. But what courts deal with justice? I mean, they don't always handle justice well, but that's the point. So why would the court give a settlement? Or why, in fact, not the court, why would somebody go out of court to reach a settlement? Because there's a justice issue. There's not a justice issue. There is a justice issue because this fund is full of money. This thing has been benefiting society. They've published a major paper, which usually, I'm giving some backstory. Major papers not only make people's academic career, it has all kind of credit. So there's all these things going on and there's money. And we now have more information. But we don't know there's a solution. Solutions are a wrong way of putting it, when you do a study on syphilis, all you're finding out is what do we learn more about syphilis? That study, let's go again. It's like trying to find out, like, let's do a study on long COVID. For those who don't know, COVID, there's some people have COVID that like they have it for a long time. If you want to find out everything about COVID and do a follow-up study, people have to agree to be in it, not just to go to their doctor. So this is the same thing. We're studying a disease that we don't have the cure for. So since nobody is answering, so I don't know what somebody wrote, there was a solution to the issue, research. So there's a cure. Okay, so there's a cure called penicillin. And since it was not told to the people, so two things should have happened. Both they should have been told, and secondly, they should have been provided the penicillin. And to not provide any penicillin, plus not to tell them, is a matter of injustice. Basically, they were used, and then despite the study having value to society, there was nothing to essentially help them out now that penicillin was, that's injustice. So let me just answer the question. I wasn't going to do a lecture yet. There are two basic ways in which we talk about justice in research. So one is if the study goes well, right? How can that study help? How can that study help the people or the community where that study is done? So let me give you some examples. Across the globe, a lot of research studies, especially in health, tend to be done in lesser developed parts of the world because it costs less to do it there. So because it costs less to do it there, and it's normally big, large companies, like say pharmaceutical companies, they then take the drug that they develop and have now gotten the results to it, and then they bring it back to the developed world and then sell it at high amounts of money. So if they do that, it basically doesn't benefit the people who are in the study or the people near to them, it only benefits other people. So some people would say that's not just. the study was done in one country, and now all of them are priced out to the price point of that. Then the other way, so let me see what Janelle says. That's true, you know, as they followed them for their, oh, this is not about back to the same one for their whole life, but never gave them treatment despite having access. Well, they eventually gave them money and medical treatment. So they did. Sorry. So by the way, to be fair, not until there was in the newspaper, that is when they were, if you see here, they were given lifestyle medical benefits in 1974. But this is after that. 45 to 74 is, what is that? 55, 65, 29 years after penicillin was a known treatment. So that's a kind of ridiculous amount of time after. 1 or 2 years, I can understand. But that kind of time lag is just ridiculous. So too long a time between penicillin being studied, being known as a treatment, and it actually being granted to the participants in the research study. So I'm saying that there are 2 ways, let me go back to this. There are 2 ways that justice is talked about. So one is, if the research project comes out with good results, the question is, how will it benefit the participant and people who live near to them? And the other way is, if the research study harms the participants, how will they be compensated or the harm be undone if possible? So, you know, that could be either physical harm or psychological harm, typically. So there should be provision for when things go wrong, and there should be provision for when things go right. So provision for things going wrong is for the participants, and provision for things going right is, what about the people who, either those people in the study or people who live in the community near them? So it's not just benefiting other kinds of people. That makes sense, I hope. And nobody's talking to me. And so out of this Tuscany thing, well, and then the third one to talk about is the Nuremberg Code. And in 1947, 23 physicians from the German Nazi Party were tried for crimes against humanity because of atrocious experiments that were carried out about prisoners of war without their consent. And if you want to spend some time looking up the gross medical experiments, some even on children, it is like literally sickening. And because it was so sickening, not just what happened in the war, even those medical experiments, there was this creation of the Nuremberg Code, which is 10 ethical principles for human experimentation. And that includes things like informed consent, absence of coercion, as the people should agree to be in a study, proper scientific experimentation, and beneficence, as in the experiment should benefit the people who are in the study, or at least it should not harm them. So, and this is what I just mentioned. We were here before, and there are actually quite a number of different research ethic codes. One of them that I was introduced to is called, I don't know how to say this, CIOMS, and it has a long list of guidelines, 25 of them. And interestingly, it includes things like the use of online information, women as research participants, children and adolescents. And this one I find particularly interesting: research conducted in low resource settings. That's us. Meaning, even though Jamaica is a upper middle income country, you all know that, right?
Yes, please.
Yes. Who don't know that yet? So for those who don't know, according to the World Bank, why are we upper middle income? We're upper middle income because if you take the entire income of Jamaica and divided by the number of citizens, it's higher than a lot of places in the world. So just to give it for those who are like finding this shocking, but we also have a big equity gap. So in Jamaica, the rich is much richer than the poor. So that's why as a country, we're upper middle income. But despite that, we're clearly not as well off as some other nations. So let's move on. So as somebody had mentioned earlier, privacy is something to really be to take pause about. So most of our research projects in computing will tend to look at privacy as being a risk factor. So confidentiality is ability to keep something secret, which is really about the researchers keeping something secret. But privacy is the right of the person having control of who have access about him or her, and both confidentiality and privacy are both at risk for disclosure during research project, and these need to be respected. And so, by the way, let me just say one thing about this. So usually what is expected is that unless it's fundamental to the research to collect persons' names or like TRN, social security number, things like that, telephone numbers, those things are only collected if absolutely necessary for research. So many surveys, those are not necessary, so they're not collected because you want to cut down on confidentiality and privacy. And even in a study where you would actually want to follow the participant, like a pre-test and a post-test, you would now separate the privacy things in a database separate from, and only put them back together when you're contacting the person. You know, like for example, you could have record one and everything about record one, and then record one, you know, oh, here's the phone number and the name of that person, but you don't store it together because that cuts on a likelihood that somebody's going to hack it and all of that. But you're just going to contact person one, and then you're going to store the rest of person one database as the other records there, but you don't store them together. Okay, so research design is very important. So the aim of all research projects is to advance knowledge, and that involves using a number of systematic steps to analyze information to increase our understanding on a topic. So you need to pose a question, collect data to answer the question, and present the answers to the question very simply, as we have basically said from the first week of the class. So will all research meet this criteria? The thing about it, if what you're doing to collect the data is not going to answer the question in a way that's valid and reliable, then you could say that the research design is not ethical. Some people actually disagree, but I was going to tell you. So if you design a research study and the research design is not going to lead to a valid answer, then it's a waste of time. So for example, that's a good example. So for example, if you want to find out if, let's go to, I don't know, somebody in the class who's here right now, give me a topic that you're researching for your concept note / lit review. Where are you going with it? I'm just going to go with somebody in the class. Nobody is going to give me a topic.
Chatbots.
What's that?
Chatbots.
Oh, chat box. You're in my class. So there's a group in one of my classes that's looking at whether chat box can help improve the treatment of depression among, I guess, Jamaicans. So by the way, there's already some research that shows that. So let's say we want to do that research and find out, I guess, among, I don't know, Jamaican adults living in Kingston who have access to the internet. So let's go to at least that. So we only want people who have internet access. So so we want to find out if this chat box work. Now there are many parts of it that could be problematic. So one part of problematic could be it take the people who are at the worst in their depression. So if there was no research on that, you wouldn't start with that. So this is not research. This is back to where that would be back to not even here. It's just back to the basic fundamental thing about, in fact, let me go back to this. You see this thing about respect for persons. So, and beneficence, you would not take the people who have the worst levels of depression and put them in the study initially, because you would always start with the people who have the least levels of depression, and then you would do like a pilot study with them before you pick people who have significant levels of depression because you wouldn't want to not be sure what is happening. So, but aside from that, we now want to say what is a research design that's going to work. So if we just take up and say, okay, let's see, what do we want to do? Let me see, what is your methods that you're planning to do? Or you're going to do an experiment, right?
Are you referring to me, Teach?
Yeah, man, I'm referring to you.
Yes, Teach.
All right. So, for example, in order to figure out how effective chatbots are on persons with clinical depression among Jamaican adults, a good research design is to do an experiment where you're going to compare a control group of persons with depression who get treated with regular treatment compared to one with regular treatment plus the chat box, or maybe chat box instead of the regular treatment. Poor design could be, let's just look at chat box and you don't have a control group. The thing is, when you do that, you could say that there's perception among the groups that the research works, but if you don't have a control group, you're not going to be able to come to a conclusion. Now, is it unethical? There might be some debate there, but the point is, we won't be able to tell anything about if chatbots are really effective. All you'll be able to tell is about the perception. Because if you don't compare it with the other group, you won't know if it's any better. But it could just be we're using a fancy computer system and it's just the placebo effect. And so if you're going to take up people's time and say you're doing this nice research design, you want to, if possible, design it in a way that is robust. Anyway, next one is deception in research. So the question is, can there be any situation where you deceive the participant and it'll be okay? The answer is usually no. Can anybody think of any exceptions? The answer is, it depends. Can you imagine? So the answer is like 95% of the time, no, you should never deceive people in research. Why would there be any exceptions? Anybody can hazard a guess? There actually are research projects that it's difficult to do properly without deception. And the argument is that you always need to tell the participants afterwards that just for the time of the study, they were not told the full story. So the two examples I can come up with are one that I've seen online on TV or something where, for example, they want to find out how people eat in different circumstances. Like, for example, do you know that people who eat with red plates or red cutlery tend to eat more than those with blue? They know this because they give people some study where they just give them different size, and also the size is all that matter. So when there's a smaller size container, you tend to eat less. So they know this because they put people in an experimental condition without telling them that this experiment is about. And they afterwards say, oh, by the way, we're really trying to find out how much food you're eating. So they set up a whole experiment and afterwards tell them, oh, by the way, we're really finding out how much you ate food. Oh, by the way, here's the money we already planned to tell you. I hope you're not upset. And of course, nobody's upset by that one. So it's like that if you tell people about what they're eating, they're going to start like watching what they're eating. Everybody getting what I'm saying here? So there's studies like that. If you tell people that the study is really about eating, then people can go, okay, they tend to, because they know that they're being observed, they tend to change their behavior. But there's even ones in computing. So if you want to find out about people's security habits in an artificial setting, it is considered normally okay to set them up to see if they will, like, how they like not follow good cybersecurity habits. But usually that's not okay in real life. So that those kind of things are acceptable if it's in sort of artificial environment, or you having somebody go into a lab to in an artificial environment where you've set up the whole environment, here's a password, all of that. But to be doing that in a real world situation where you could be putting the person at risk by not telling that they're at greater risk because of your experiment, no. So generally speaking, the philosophy I would say as to why I personally believe that research ethics committees are great is because they are really good at giving a second eye on what researcher might think, oh yeah, this is not a problem. But the committee says, no, this is a problem. We need to change the experiment. So there are times where a committee could say yes. Sorry, there are two terms for the committee. They're either called a research ethics committee or institutional review board, right? So when the committee or review board could say yes, under these circumstances, research might be possible. Research with children are vulnerable groups. So you need to have, if it's in a setting, you need to have the authorities, like at a school with the principal, if it's somewhere else, whoever's in charge. You need permission of both parents and guardians. And this, if they're adolescents of about 15, usually the child alone can give consent. But once it's a young child, it must be also parents and guardians. And then young children can only give what is called assent. So if you think about it, an 8-year-old who is conscious can actually say, I don't want to be in a research study, even if the parents said yes. So you must get the permission of a person in charge and parents, guardians, as well as the child needs to agree to be in the study. And by the way, this is actually important because I know one of my colleagues actually had some research study going on at a school that her child was at, and the parent wasn't given permission, and that's definitely wrong. So you should not do that. And then there's so many ways in which you can actually use statistics to mislead the public, either in your publication or in your presentation. And it's not something you should ever do. And so there's not only should you not falsify data, that's obvious, but it's also how you present the data. So if you have small numbers, you should present it as out of a certain number, because if you say 15% when you only had 30 participants, it's better to say 2 in 30, because 15% sounds like it's a high number. So once the numbers are small, you should be sure that you don't put the data in a way that gives people the idea that you have more credible data than you do. Then with academic writing, we already know that you should not plagiarize. So if you're going to put something that's direct quotation, it should have quotation marks. And you already know that you should limit that to a bare minimal. That you already know that you should paraphrase with citations. So doing this without citations is also incorrect. And did you know that there's something called self-plagiarism, which is if you have written a paper for school, or if you have published something, if you have it and you don't refer to it, that's also called self-plagiarism, and that's also wrong. So you're supposed to be careful how you do either of those things. And by the way, and this is important in terms of major project. So if you want to go from this class and take the same topic into major project, if some people have dropped your group, then those people need to, you need to take out every part that they have done and rewrite it. Otherwise, that's not self-plagiarism, that's straight plagiarism. So the idea is that you can continue, but you would need to add more to the chapter 1, 2, 3. But anyway, we're still going to add more because you want to have chapters 4 and 5. So that is, it's actually encouraged. But usually what you do at the end of chapters 1 to 5 here is not going to finish the project. Anyway, so research ethics. So the requirements here is that the research should involve, so this is UTEX requirement. It must, in terms of handling data, publications, conflict of interest, all of these should be done properly. Otherwise, there are sanctions. And there are some steps. I'm not going to worry about the steps. What time it is? Yeah, there's some steps at UTEX application. So by the way, for our next assignment, there is a ethics application assignment, which I will show. Am I going to show it today? I don't know. I could show it sometime. Leave me show it today, that might be a good idea. So there's an application assignment and there's status report, and after you apply, which the application also includes the various instruments, as in like if you have a survey or interview, all of those things are attached. You also attach the informed consent as well as the letter to participant. So yeah, and then you get a certificate which you put in your bond document. And let's not worry about that right now. This is a process within UTech, and that, yeah, let's not worry about that right now. So yes, so I wanted to show, somebody had a question, and I could also show, maybe I should do that when I'm looking it up. All right, so somebody had asked a question about I'm going to look this thing up though. It's the wrong place. I'm just looking up my document. Give me 1 second. Somebody had asked about is it here? Or maybe the other one. No, it's not this. I just realized my document, my thing is getting large. I scroll through here. This is it. So something here should be the ethics. Date modified. Date modified, not type, date modified is what I want. Why does it look like I'm actually looking to see why this thing is not coming up? Maybe it's under this. No. Okay. Well, I can't find the format I'm looking for, so maybe I'll just find another one. Yeah, let's just go to this instead then. I think this doesn't even have what I want. Oh dear. I'm trying to look for a paper that will show you what I want to show you, but I'm not finding it right away. This is annoying. Anyway, let me just answer the question that was asked first. So somebody asked a question about the lit review. So generally speaking, let me just share screen and go with that, because I can definitely go with that live easier. We can always do the ethics form another day. So here, so in general, a literature review has an introduction, a body, and a summary, right? So that lit review is either considered a chapter or a whole paper. So for example, as an assignment, it's a whole paper, but it usually becomes a piece of a chapter. So in this, so I'm suggesting that that introduction and body, you are usually not going to write those words. I suggest that you use the word summary, not the word conclusion. And why would I suggest that you not use the word summary, or summary, not conclusion? So in the summary, I'm expecting two things. I'm expecting, wait, didn't it do this? So I'm expecting points from the body and the gaps in the literature. That's what I'm expecting in the summary. Like you would have told us something, and here you're going to tell us that back again. And I would suggest, even though some people teach that, do not put the focus of your research. Now, why do I say do not do this? Because I keep seeing people doing it. I didn't want to do that. Undo that, and let's do So guys, when I say don't do this, the gap in the literature leads you to this. So this should be related to your research questions. And so the reason why I would tell everybody in my class that I expect that I have no problem with you adjusting your concept paper is because when you do a more thorough literature review, you're going to see how whether your research questions were well founded in the first place. But let's go back to this. You have an introduction, which is going to be 1 or 2 paragraphs. It's going to be more than that's it. So this is going to be depending on what you want to say. No, I can't tell you what to say. So at the very least, what you could put here is something like this is not looking, I want them to look similar, but it doesn't matter. Like in this paper or in this chapter, we will discuss, and if it's X, Y, Z, so let's make it really easy. X, Y, Z. And the point is, like if you were doing by engineering, it would be X.2. What are the major things on the X? Similarly on the Y. Now technically in APA, you're not putting any numbers or any things like this. But my point is, what you're trying to figure out is what are my major points and are there any subpoints? That is, so it's basically you're coming up with what are your major themes. I would not suggest that you do it by study. I would suggest you do it by area. So it depends on what your project is about. So like the one that we just talked about, I think I've done it before, but they will be looking at stuff like it will be straight from their concept note. So they're looking at things like there's a problem of depression, and then there is chat box, you know, in fact, it could be that they're looking at AI used to treat mental illness, you know, but it could be that they don't want to start with AI, they want straight go to the chat boxes. So it all depends. Is there literature on that? Is the stuff on chat boxes so much that you don't need to go to AI? But, you know, chat boxes are some sort of AI. So, you know, used to treat depression. You know, so on the depression, without even thinking, I know some of the things that I'd want to look at here. I don't know what to do this bullet. Like on depression, some of the things that I'd want to talk about is the prevalence, obviously I spelled that wrong. That is how frequent it is. The you know, the cost to society or whatever, the burden. The burden to society. Yeah, prevalence and burden to society. What else would you want to talk about here? Vulnerable groups, maybe. The burden is like the cost. The point is, I'm just brainstorming as to what I'll be talking about under depression. I mean, I know that it's now ranked as the #1. Depression is now considered the #1, has a #1 impact on quality of life among people across the world. That's a serious thing to be saying. Yeah, so there's depression, and then you're going to talk a lot about how AI is used to treat, I think this is artificial intelligence, right? So artificial intelligence. Either you're going to go straight to chat boxes, and you know, maybe before this you're going to have some story about, you know, it could be AI, which might include chat boxes and different types. But the point is, how much are you, and you need to have something called transition. So just in terms of writing, you're going to need transition between each section. So if you're going to put this, you're going to say, and there has been some evidence or some interest. Yes, you're here. Yeah, come in. Yeah. So that is the basic idea. So everybody getting where I'm going with this? And the key is for every paragraph, you need citations. So this entire thing is going to be, like I said, I don't know what your teacher is telling you. It's going to be somewhere between 8 to 15 pages. And I would usually suggest that it be longer than 8 pages. Because for you to write, remember the 8 pages, no, that's the 8 pages without the cover page and without the reference page. For you to write an excellent paper that is that short, it's going to be tricky. But yeah, so hopefully some of the saying the body, you don't call it a body. You just go ahead and start writing. So hopefully that was useful. Let me stop sharing.